Welcome to another episode of Beauty and the Priest. I'm Fiona.
And I'm Jim, and today we're actually going to continue the previous show that we had done before, which was about being able to respectfully disagree. Today, what we're going to talk about is maintaining integrity of your own position, even in the face of opposition, which is one of those areas, though, I'm really quite passionate about, making sure that we can get through our tribalization. People typically want to make sure they're surrounded by other people within their community who support their values and their views. But it's important to break through those barriers and be able to respectfully disagree.
Yeah.
So Fiona, do you want to launch us off with this as an idea?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of different scenarios that come to my mind, but I think one of the things that I used to have trouble with is being able to stand my ground when somebody disagreed with me, and I would actually back down because a couple of issues there was fear of rejection and people pleasing. And I found that I was actually compromising and not maintaining my integrity. And this is part of maturity and growth and learning as well. But I didn't also have the confidence and I think self-esteem was in there as well. So we're talking a few years ago where I would literally just fold like a cheap suit under somebody else's difference of opinion and just allow them to like manipulate mine. And then I would feel bad about myself afterwards and then beat myself up because I wasn't getting it right. And I think that there's lots of people that might have that not difficulty, but challenge in maintaining because of those underlying fears of rejection or retaliation or whatever else it is, the little voice in their head that says be seen and not heard, or whatever it is that might be the catalyst.
Be nice, be agreeable, get along with people. Otherwise they won't like you.
Yeah.
Then you'll have no friends.
Yeah. And especially if you do have some, deep-seated fear of rejection, which so many people do have for one reason or another, that can make it like just what I would experience is like anxiety that would literally freeze me in my tracks. So it was like I couldn't talk. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that then from a space perspective.
Sorry.
Because the way I just hearing what you said there, I think that this is really helpful for us to consider the work of Walter Cannon. A lot of people will not know his name, but they'll certainly know the terms. So popularly back in the 1920s, I think it was 1930s, his research led us to the idea of flight or fight.
Yeah.
They are not the only two stressful responses, but they're the most popularly thought of. There's actually four stress responses. So one is fight, so you'll actually engage and fight. The other one is flight, as in you'll run away. Yeah, the other one is deer in the headlights, stand there and do nothing.
Yeah.
And the fourth, which is the most uncommon, is the way of moving forward with a measured response. And largely that usually gets dismissed as being something that comes through a lot of training.
Yeah.
So from a military perspective, they would talk about this is why we're doing training. So, as soon as the bullets start flying, you don't run away or whatever, you'll do this and you'll think about your mates and you'll do all these different things.
Yeah.
So Walter Cannon was really helpful in that space, and just thinking about that stress reaction, being aware of that can really make us think of a way of stepping forward in the best possible way. Because I think that, given the topic that we're talking about, maintaining integrity in an opposing position is something that's really important. Some things are worth fighting for.
Yeah.
And I think that's something we really need to sort of walk through a little.
Yeah. And imagine how many people don't have that confidence to step forward and still maintain that. And that's a really great point, bringing up that fourth one that nobody ever really does talk about, because you always hear fight or flight or fight or flight or freeze. But the most important one is being able to experience those feelings and then emotionally self-regulate into a way forward. And it's a really good way of putting it. In the army, like, you would need to know how to, because stress releases cortisol, and cortisol really messes with your cognitive function, your problem solving skills, all that sort of stuff, which is why you feel a little bit deer in the headlights. But being able to move forward and be able to work out, I guess, like if you're in the middle of a an attack in the army, or even liken it to I'm just sort of going down the path of an emergency department in a hospital where you've got a whole bunch of people rushing in and they're all covered in stuff, is being able to cognitively and effectively work out a path forward.
Yeah.
So bring that into an everyday situation where we freeze. One of the things that I found hard is to find my way forward, to be able to have a respectful conversation and still be able to maintain my ideas and even just stand up, like you said, stand up for what you believe in and not folding underneath the pressure.
Yeah, maintaining your own integrity of your position.
Yes. Yeah.
Sometimes it is worthwhile fighting, you know.
Yeah.
I know in the Bible it does talk about Paul's letter to the church in Ephesus, in Ephesians. He talks about don't get a bit angry.
Yes.
That's one of those things that people like to think about, particularly in a marital relationship. Some things are worth fighting about. Some things you shouldn't compromise on just because the other person wants this or whatever. You do need to work on your own perspective. Obviously, you need to think about, why do I want that, or why do I not want that?
Choose your battles.
Choose your battles, absolutely. But sometimes it's well worthwhile to think about the way to maintain our position, to be able to go, no, even to the point of sometimes saying, look, I don't even understand why, but for me, sometimes, somehow something about this is really important, and it's worthwhile for me to perhaps think about that, and I'll come back to you and we can discuss this further.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the things that really spring to my mind anyway.
I think that's a really great example. And also, like, help me understand why this is important to you then, because I don't. So it's even being able to draw more information out from them so that you can see a bit of their perspective. And what you said right at the beginning of that is, like, first understand why you are, like, why is my opinion this? Why do I want to, what is it that's making me do this? And going back to our previous recording, talking about our ego and is this even really necessary for me to oppose it? Where's this coming from? Is it my values? But still, it doesn't matter where it's coming from. What we were just saying off air is be aware and acknowledge our own feelings and then respond with kindness and respect, which was the theme of the last video. So then what would your, for somebody who does have, because it took me a lot of work to get to the stage where I could actually stand in my own strong space and safe space and be able to stand my ground, especially in leadership. And when you are dealing with, the corporate level, like the CEO level, and you're the person between that level and all the people, and you've got to, like, stand up for their rights, and you've got to stand your ground really in protection of other people. It took a lot of work to get there. And so, like, a 30-minute episode of Beauty and the Priest is not going to be able to cast light on everything and the strategies that you need. But if you were, say, talking to somebody who was having trouble maybe standing their ground with their kids or even their partner, what would be your, I guess, I don't want to use the word advice because we probably shouldn't, what would be your words of wisdom, let's say?
Sure. I mean, well, for me, obviously, my first perspective would be to pray.
Good one. Yeah.
And then, notwithstanding that, the next perspective would be to look at whatever that issue is as separate from yourself.
Yeah.
And I think when you've got two opposing parties, if they can do that, if they can stop seeing themselves tied up in that issue, stop personalizing that issue. Marriage counselors are great at doing this. It's like you sit on the couch together and you look at the problem as being something that's sitting on the couch between you.
Yeah, right.
And so, or even sitting on the next couch opposite you, and then address that individually. Then play it together as a couple. How are we going to address that problem?
Yeah.
That's one way I would think of doing it. So it's not just for married couples, but it is for people in general. It's even for countries to look at and going, look, this is a problem. Yes, we are experiencing in different ways, but it is a problem. Can we at least address the fact that is a concern area? It's only by acknowledging that can we start sort of identifying areas and aspects of it, and then we can start looking at ways of dealing with it.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. It's very easy. Well, not very easy. It's easier when you've got someone mediating between the two of you.
No passion.
If only you could have like a pastoral carer or a counselor walk around and stand in the middle of all of your relationships when you are having conversations that might create some sort of conflict. But it happens a lot in workplaces as well. Sorry. I'm really good at mediating other people's conflicts and problems, and coaching people through that sort of stuff. And it's a lot easier to help somebody else through that. And it's a lot harder to do it in certain situations yourself if something's triggering you. So I think that's the other thing, is to be able to work out where's that voice coming from that's telling you to be quiet, or that's telling you not to say anything, or where's that fear coming from that is freezing you or whatever. So say if you don't have that person in the middle, and you've got something that is really causing you an upset, but you don't want to tell your partner or your colleague or your boss or whatever it is, because you're afraid that it's going to cause the conflict. And the first thing you need to do is go, is this something that I'm prepared to live with for the foreseeable future, and compromise and give and have, be drained? And maybe even writing some notes down and separating.
Journaling, definitely worthwhile.
Yeah, writing some notes down, because when you get into that place, that's when you start freezing and your brain won't think of the words and you can't. So maybe if you either write an email, but then don't send an email, like print it out, write it on a Word document, print it out, and then maybe go through it point by point. The one big thing to remember is, and we cover this in communication training, but words are only 7% of communication. The rest is tone, body language, all of those other things that will help you in getting across your point. You want to be able to use I statements, like I'm feeling this, and when you do that, I feel this, because no one can argue with the way you feel. Like it doesn't matter what their values are, what anything they cannot disagree with your feelings, because they're your feelings. So if we're using I statements and I feel and I need, it's very different than you did this and you made, you're this and you're that. So we're labeling.
You always do this.
Yeah, you always do this, which is not fair on them. So when you do X, I feel blah. So so
look, I very much agree. The only thing I would suggest, though, is you mentioned something about if you can't have anybody else there stand up for you or whatever else like that. In some ways, there's a real benefit in not having that ability.
Yeah.
I mean, at the moment, I believe in a lot of developed world, certainly there is more access to counsellors and advocate people for you than I believe probably ever before.
Yeah.
But there is something. There's a growth opportunity, I think, able to be learned internally, and then once you learn that one thing, you can apply that one thing in a variety of different aspects, and it actually helps you grow significantly. So I'm not trying to take anything away from what you said about the I statements, but sometimes if I'm doing something that is that is triggering you in feeling different ways, that doesn't belong to me, nor do I necessarily need to change my behavior because of that. That might be potentially that might be something that you just need to deal with. So that's what I mean about maintaining integrity. So hearing that, I hear that you are distressed if that happens. Let's walk through different things about that. Is that something I can curb? Is that something just about me that is not changeable?
My expectations aren't matching your abilities.
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely true. And this is where it's so much more than just a standing my ground. It is a whole process of self-awareness and self-regulation. It's, why do I need this? Does that other person need to be thinking the same way as I am or doing what I want them to do? Or is this something, exactly what you said, something that I need to let go? But if it's something that, well, I need to tell this person because it's something that is really impacting me in a negative way. So they need to know how it's impacting me, and we need to see if there's something we can do about it, or whether we can just try and avoid the whole situation. I've got a couple of scenarios, but I'm reluctant
Let's do it.
I've got reluctant to say them because they're probably a bit too personal, but no, not that kind of personal. It was like using a scenario, and not a bad thing. No, I'll pause that. Like, I'll just pause that and have a think about whether I can come up with another.
It's going to make everybody wonder about what you're talking about, because I have got no idea what you're talking about. But okay,
nobody else except in my head knows what I'm talking about. But it was a really good example. But it's like using an example that's including somebody else. That's
you're not talking about snoring, are you?
No. No, but see, that happens, but I wear earplugs because it's my problem, because it's keeping me awake, right? So I wear earplugs. So that's a good one. All right. So regathering to get us back onto back onto topic is exactly what you've said, Jim, is assessing, am I expecting this person to, am I expecting the fish to climb a tree, first of all? In case you missed last week's episode, I said making somebody else do things the way you want, sometimes like getting a fish to climb a tree. We're asking them to do something that's just not them to do. Square peg, round hole, all of that. Is it something that you are, if you do need things to change and you're not game enough to have that conversation, you've got to ask yourself, what will be more uncomfortable, having this conversation or putting up with this long term? And the other thing that was sort of in answer to what you were saying, Jim, about sometimes stepping out of your comfort zone to put your big girl pants on or big boy pants on and have this conversation, is that confidence comes from doing things that you're scared of doing. It's not something you can buy, earn, anything else. It's something that comes from doing scary stuff. Confidence comes from doing stuff that makes you very uncomfortable. So having these conversations yourself instead of having a mediator there, and just fumbling your way through it, being like uncomfortable, being awkward, being whatever you need to be. But when you're having those difficult conversations, saying to the person, I need to tell you something, it's making me really uncomfortable and awkward. So even explaining yourself first before you actually have the conversation, and say, just please be patient with me, because I'm really not sure how to say this.
This is a high level issue for me, type of thing.
Yeah. It's just something I need to talk to you about, and maybe I'm wrong, but if you can give me a little bit of time, we can sort of talk through it together. And then there's other things where it's even acknowledge their side of it. Right? I know that this is an important thing to you as well. So I'm not expecting you to change your ways, but here's my side of it. Can we work through this together?
Yeah. I think that's really helpful and really important to be able to look at it through that perspective. One of the other things that I think of about this particular area is this idea of offense, especially in our culture, where we are at the moment. As a species in the Western world, is this idea about being offended. And it seems to me to be wielded out as a form of bullying and virtue signaling and things like that, but also just being able to say, look, what you're saying or what you're doing there, I find that really an offensive concept. Well, the way that I usually internalize that when somebody says that to me is I hear that, but I also think that this is an opportunity for growth. Just because you are offended by something doesn't give you some superpower to be able to change something in somebody else. What it does is it gives you opportunity to change something about yourself, or at least potentially reflect on it. Is there some value in what that person's saying? If there is, look for it. Find what that is. Let's see what that is. There might be some offensive things in there about the way that they addressed you, or the things that they're saying, which is potentially really triggering or whatever, but again, they are internally and they belong to you. Just because something is offensive to you doesn't necessarily mean that everybody in the world needs to be bubble wrapped so you don't get affected by it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm 100% on board with that, and I think we've taken things way too far. We are way too sensitive. I shouldn't say that. Like, that's a judgmental way of framing it, but we have gotten very sensitive and offended by everything, and the whole political correctness of everything has gotten way out of hand. And it almost pushes some people to push those boundaries where they normally wouldn't have. But what you just said, there was, I think it was an interview with the Dalai Lama. Don't quote me on this, it might be something, but if you can imagine that sort of person being interviewed, and the interviewer was just, on the attack the whole time. And I'm pretty sure it was the Dalai Lama, but just sat there and maintained complete calmness, answered the questions, did not get offended by anything that this person said. And in the end, the interviewer said, I have been coming at you with everything I've got, and you have not flinched, you haven't gotten angry. What's up with that? And he said, well, all of the insults and attacks are only mine if I take them.
Yeah.
Right? If I don't take them, they're still yours. So currently they're all still yours. Yeah. So it's exactly what you were saying, is that it's my offense. Right, or it's them if they're being bullying, or if they're doing something, it's only yours if you take it. It's all on them, and vice versa with the way I am towards you, or the way I view you. It's only a problem for me. It might not be a problem for them.
Correct. And the more times that I think about it, the times that actually come to mind whenever I think about offence or being told that I'm being offensive, that type of thing has been told to me by somebody like a third party. Yeah. Oh, you shouldn't say that because that could be offensive. And they don't mean to them, they mean potentially to other people. Yeah. And I think, well, whoever these mythical people are that you feel might be offended by my words, they're not here in this room currently, and I'd welcome to having a dialogue with them if that's such a thing. But just to wield that out, that's the thing that I think is really important. It's not a conversation stopper. It doesn't make you automatically have to re-examine and change everything about yourself, despite certain countries that are wielding out those type of laws, those re-education laws. I find them to be completely flawed and wrong. There are much bigger things that our taxes should be working on, not those.
Absolutely. And there are absolutely things we should be offended by, and we should be upset by and outraged by. Anything that harms somebody else, anything that goes against human rights, or anything that is, that is clearly something that we should be outraged. And outrage is a human emotion that we were given so that we could make changes and stand up for things. But if it's just the way somebody dresses, and this speaks to conscious and unconscious bias as well, is that we judge people, or the fact that somebody swore in a speech that they did, are they wrong, or are you, like, is it your problem or their problem? And so definitely we all need to take a step back and go, you know what, go back to the whole love one another as I have loved you rule, which is the basis for everything. And that is just loving each other as we are. And I think that's why a lot of people are put off church as well, because they're like, they feel judged and or offended. I mean, let's just all be who we are, being our best selves though, like, not going to be aggressive or obnoxious or anything, but if you are offended by my aggression and obnoxiousness, I don't even know if that's a word, then still, again, like you said, that's your problem, not mine. But I'm just checking the time. But so to go back to maintaining our integrity in the face of opposition or conflict or whatever it is what you were saying, Jim, is why am I offended? Do I need to, why do I need to have this disagreement with you? Is it worth it? Choose your battles. How do I go about explaining myself and sticking with my values, standing up for myself, standing up for my rights, and standing up for my beliefs, while still respecting yours, but not just backing down and folding underneath your needs and wants as well.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and it's really important to do that. I think that's really what led us to have this conversation. Is exactly that, maintaining your own integrity. Sometimes there are things about ourselves that do need to be changed. Yes.
Yeah.
But other times there are things about ourselves that we need to say, no, that I know that about myself. And that's kind of important.
Yeah.
They used to say, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, that girl's bossy, but they would never say that about a boy.
Yeah. No.
I don't know that anybody does that now.
Yep. Yeah. No, she's just got good leadership skills. She's not bossy. Yeah. So, well, to wrap up, Jim's frozen, whether this comes out on the video, but we'll wrap up and join us again next time for another episode of Beauty and the Priest, while I just leave Jim's face there all frozen. We'll catch you next time. Thank you so much for joining us. Bye for now.